In 1942, 110,000 people were held in internment camps. These people were only of Japanese descent. Many Americans were very afraid of Japanese people at this time because of espionage and internal spying. The attack on Pearl Harbor only increased this fear and shook up all those who were interned and still affect Japanese and American life to this day. As like most movements, someone or something starts to spark to raise interest in that topic. In the case of Japanese American internment, that something was fear, and that person was Val Dickinson. The most famous case of internal spying in the 1940s is of Val Dickinson. She was convicted of espionage and selling out American naval information to the Japanese. She told the Japanese about the USS Saratoga and other warships. Because of this, an almost Red Scare-like panic swept across the nation after this was publicized. Not only did the media exaggerate internal spying, the media also exaggerated Japanophobia through Pearl Harbor. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a surprise attack on an American naval base in Hawaii by the Japanese Imperial Navy. The attack was meant to destroy the Navy's whole fleet, but due to fluke coincidence, some aircraft carriers were not in the harbor and subsequently went unscathed. Nonetheless, the attack was still devastating. 2,350 American soldiers were killed and 178 were injured. Also, this attack led directly to the USA's entry into World War II. As if this wasn't enough, papers across the nation began publishing how Japanese American farmers were taking away the jobs of real Americans. False stories were made about the loyalty of Japanese Americans, and suspicion rose throughout the country. Farmers said, "Us white farmers can grow everything the Japanese grow," which only increased anti-Japanese feelings throughout America. Because so many white Americans were afraid of Japanese people after the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president at the time, had to do something to make sure Japanophobia did not interfere anymore with everyday life. FDR thought exclusion zones, where only Japanese Americans would be housed, would help ease the tension between white Americans and Japanese Americans. To make this happen, the exclusion zones were primarily on the west coast of America. All of California and most of Oregon were exclusion zones for those who had Japanese ancestry. Most of the camps were on Native American reservations and were eerily like normal towns. If a civilian walked by an internment camp, they may have noticed that the Japanese Americans were housed in tar paper covered barracks of simple frame construction. The camp would probably have contained average facilities like schools and food halls. However, while the camps may have looked harmless to an innocent looker, there was always a constant reminder that things are far from normal in the camps. The houses were built like military barracks and were very cramped, especially for large families. Toilets and showers were shared by more than 250 people. Food was rationed under a budget of 45 cents daily per person. And there have also been numerous reported incidents of security guards around the internment camps, shooting Japanese Americans who were simply walking outside their internment boundary. After these shootings, the internment camp's security measures were examined and subsequently changed. The change gave more freedom to the internees. It allowed them to leave the camp and have more movement across the country. On the 18th of December 1944, the nightmare for Japanese Americans ended. Internment ceased, but memories and effects still last to the very day. The effects range from American economy to health of Japanese Americans. Feelings between Japanese Americans and the effects range from the American economy to the health of Japanese Americans. Feelings between Japanese Americans and Americans have worsened. Some Japanese Americans and Americans still remember the camps, and it makes relationships harder to form between the two groups of people. Also, people who are interned have a 2-to-1 greater risk of cardiovascular disease. Most Japanese Americans lost almost all their possessions, and to compensate for their losses, the U.S. Congress made the Civil Liberties Act, which pays each internment victim $20,000 in reparations over time. From researching why Japanese Americans were held in internment camps, I found striking similarities between the Nazi concentration camps and the American internment camps. Many of the reasons for the camps are similar. Both camps were made in anger at certain groups of people, Jews and Japanese Americans, and in both cases, innocent citizens were held behind bars. However, the two camps are on opposite levels of extremism. Well, the Nazi concentration camps were like machines of death. The Japanese internment camps were simply a place to keep Japanese Americans after attack on Pearl Harbor to prevent racist riots and outbreaks. So how do you feel that your country, the supposed beacon of freedom, kept innocent citizens behind bars?